Hey guys, what's up? It's me again. This time I would like to share with you guys something that we finished today at the university. It is a brochure for a class called Binding and Finishing. It's going to be the new advertising brochure for the new print media technology students who will be coming to do an all English undergraduate program starting, I think, next semester or the first semester of next year, something like that. But we're basically in the Binding and Finishing tasked a high quality brochure with higher quality materials. Even though it's just a student project, we were given a little bit higher of a budget than normal, and this is what we made. And I'd like to explain with you maybe a few of the printer thoughts that went into it. Yeah, all of the cool stuff about why I'm very proud of how this turned out. So if you look at the cover, the cover basically explains the theme right away. We are aiming this new major at a really large international field. And in order to do so, we took me as an American, an English speaker in the program, a Chinese girl, and a guy from Iraq. We basically told our stories in Germany, our personal stories in Germany, and tied that in with a sort of introduction to what print actually is. And for this reason, we have, of course, the 3 languages at the front. And this whole thing we laid out in InDesign, including the cover. And unfortunately, you can't feel it. But this paper right here actually has a soft touch finish. It's a very nice piece of paper. We only printed 50 copies of the brochure with this kind of paper because it's a really nice piece of paper. Basically, we used what's called a hot foil stamp to put this sort of bronze label on it. And one of the problems with this that we didn't really expect was that the paper doesn't have much give when you apply lots of pressure to it. So the depth of the impression from the hot foil stamp it's all right. It's definitely impressed into the paper, but we had some other papers that were able to reflect in a pretty amazing depth and have a lot of nice touch to them. But yeah, and also on the outside, I can't forget to mention these staples, for example, were originally meant to be black, and we had ordered some black staples, but the black plastic coating on the staples inside of the staple machine would just come off whenever we would staple things. So that ended up not being possible. And these staples unfortunately look somewhat cheap, and they're very run-of-the-mill staples. But you know, what are you gonna do when a company sends you a huge spool of free black wire and it doesn't work and all you have left is what the university has? So that's okay, and they work pretty well for our purposes from a practical standpoint. The only other thing that you have to worry about these kinds of staples is what I'll show you when we get to the inside. This is just the basic cover. Welcome to the brochure. And we actually made a lot of brochures without covers, and they this cover page without an actual paper Umschlag, it's called, without a paper cover, looks pretty nice as well. This, of course, is just your basic introduction. We use all of the house fonts at the university. And all of the photography, by the way, is my photography. If you have watched my channel because of my photography, this is all stuff that I shot just specifically for this project. Keep going through and you'll notice we have the first flap. These flaps and this panorama, but we'll stick with the flaps, are a real feat of engineering, because basically, where do you even start? So firstly, when we designed this brochure, before we had any of the layout put onto paper, we had a bit of an idea of what the content of the brochure would be, and we basically had to develop blank pages and add flaps where we thought possible that would also be able to be printed onto a single sheet that would allow us then to cut all of these half sheets together and sort of optimize logistically the printing process. That alone, just the planning, took maybe 2 days of discussion. And then you get into sort of the tolerances when you actually fold the thing. And the tolerances that you have here on this side of the sheet, as you can see, there's a bit of the last page sticking out. And that's because whenever it comes to trimming this book down to size, you of course have to trim all 3 sides. And on the front side, you have to trim this down by, say, 1 centimeter. And if you end up trimming the edge here of this flap, the joint where it joins with the rest of the paper, you would lose your flap, of course, because it would just get cut off. And this requires that you have nearly sub-millimeter precision in the folding machine, and especially because something like this can happen. And it's really hard to see because it's such a small detail, but there are actually what's called dancing pages, and there are other pages with flaps, and ultimately the height of each page is normally the actual length of the brochure. But on the pages that have flaps, you all want them to be a standard height as well, but that's difficult because of the tolerances of the folding machine. And the only way to really get them to the same height would probably be to fold them by hand, but we have maybe 400, 500 copies of these, so that is not producible in an industrial sense. But so the pages dance a little bit, but ultimately I think it looks great, and our professor commended us on our ability to work with a folding machine like this. But designing the book with these flaps, and you'll see there are more flaps coming, was a real challenge. And then you get to like another two problems with the panorama, that once you fold this material with ink on top of it, you get a break in the material and you get a white line in the image. And this, in an industrial sense or in the practical world, would probably earn you a complaint from a customer, unfortunately, because they of course don't want to have a white line in the middle of their very expensive image. And for that, you would have to really consider what kind of material you're using or what kind of ink you're using, because it needs to be folded or creased without breaking. And in this case, it did indeed break. And then it came to another problem actually in the print. So that's also another really hard thing to see because it's so minute, but this panorama doesn't actually line up, and it's about a millimeter off. And this is very noticeable when it comes to very nicely captured panoramas that have lots of details on the fold that sort of stop lining up. And that's because whenever we printed these sheets, and we had all these half sheets laid out on stacks that were really high up of printed sheets, we had coated them with powder to prevent the sheets from sticking and to help in the drying process. And this powder combined with the ink actually deformed the paper in such a way that as we put these stacks into this cutting machine, the blade would actually not travel in a straight way down, but rather at a very slight angle, and it would cut it would cut the sheets to slightly different sizes. And we're talking, once again, we're in the millimeter tolerances, and this, unfortunately, our tolerances were not tight enough that we could actually fit this and make this panorama line up exactly. And we noticed that as we were binding a bunch of the editions, it sort of it varies with each page, because of course the sheets as they were cut all to different sizes. And some brochures have a perfect match on the panorama, some don't. That's just, it's one of the problems that we had not thought about and that we did indeed learn this time around. As for the text, this was all corrected by us, and there is one mistake that I found at the very end when we finally finished all of this and we're reading through it. That sucks. But other than that, it's just, it's kind of organized in a logical way. You have your introduction, and then we go through the stories, and then we talk about the printing process. We have here sort of a call to action page that kind of brings you into print. This is the real introduction into the printing sections. And of course, we were talking about why we love print, because I think people at the university really do love print. We are all really passionate about it, and that's probably one of the best things about being in the university. So this is my story in Germany, and we basically put this at the front of the book because it's an English speaker's story, and most of the people to whom we are marketing this new major are English speakers. So we kind of took that into account and brought my story first. But honestly, I find my story a little bit boring compared to Yumeng's story or Barker's story. This is Yumeng. She is a Chinese girl she's doing an exchange program at our university, and we printed her actual natively written story in Chinese on this flap here, as you can see. And once you open this, you see the translation in English, which is, I think, is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool feature, and of course the photography I'm pretty happy with. The pictures all seem to line up because they were on different sheets, and that's basically her story. We go to Barker. He's from Iraq, and by the way, Yumeng is from the city that I'm going to in China to also continue studying print. It's called Xi'an. It's a really cool city. Then we have Barker's story, and in case you didn't already know this, Arabic texts are read from right to left, and we incorporated this into one of the flaps by allowing the reader to open it to the right, move it over, and then read it from right to left, like an Arabic book. Also pretty cool. And Barker's pictures also is pretty nice. This is a group portrait of all three of us together. And then we get into the actual sections of print about how print is actually constructed as a sort of way of producing products. And we start with pre-press, which is the design phase and stuff like that. And then we go to here. This page unfortunately has tons of text. I wasn't really totally on board with all the text, but we needed an explanation for why there are so many use cases for print. There are some really interesting facts actually. The printing industry rivals the automobile industry worldwide. The size of the industry, it's 6 times larger than the video game industry. It is the 6th largest industry in America. Of the 22 largest industries in Japan, it's the 8th largest. It is a really, really huge industry. It's kind of amazing that this is not taught in more schools. But these are all examples of things in our daily lives that we totally take for granted that are direct products of printing. And then we go through digital print. That's the HP Indigo that we have. That we got that recently at the university. It's a pretty amazing digital printing machine. These are 2 of the colleagues in the screen printing department. All of the people that you see in these pictures were members of the project. So basically my classmates in binding and finishing. And then we have intaglio printing, which is sort of your roll-to-roll printing method. And as you can see here, this is sort of the roll output of that printing method. And yeah, we basically have some terms about what the equipment is, stuff like that. Oh, the offset part is really cool. I really like this picture. This is sort of a panorama of Gerhard, our offset machine. A really nice picture. And I honestly wish I could just cut this page out and hang it on my wall. And it turned out nice. There's of course the break in the page, but the picture quality is really nice. I must say that the pictures do come through quite well, even though this paper is sort of industry standard paper and has sort of a magazine kind of feel, even though we were going for a softer kind of feel. But the pictures do look brilliant. You go through the description of what offset is. This is an offset machine right here. This is flexography. This is sort of a printing method that is very promising, and it's developing really quickly, especially in Asia, where they're printing things like packaging, like sort of non-paper packaging. That's kind of a challenge. And this happens to be the facility that we have at the university. It's a pretty interesting method of printing, and I think it's gonna, like I said, grow the fastest in Asia, but the other countries I don't think have yet the necessity to afford this expensive way of printing a whole bunch of different materials. So we have, of course, the innovation and the developments in print right now. Talking about 3D printing as well. 3D printing there's a lot of buzz in that in the news. I'm sure I don't have to tell you. Post-press is basically the very end. It's the very end of the book and also the end of the printing production process. Post-press is literally called finishing a product, and post-press involves things like the cover, for example, of this brochure and the staples and the folding of the pages, all the things that happen after the print that actually create the final product that you then have in your hand. And that's how we concluded the book. And this machine actually right here was the machine that we used to cut all the brochures. And then we have the last thing is Auf Wiedersehen, that is goodbye in German, see you again. And of course the legal imprint about who made this and stuff like that. And a very faint repetition of the panorama that you saw at the very beginning. And then you're pretty much done. Then you have one more hot foil stamp on the back with the school's logo. And that is indeed about it. I don't think I will go into more detail about it. I think that's a pretty comprehensive explanation of the problems and the learning experiences that we had while we were making this brochure. And hopefully I sort of entertained you with some printer thoughts that maybe don't occur to you whenever you're walking around your daily life and maybe don't even realize that you're seeing printing products, but oftentimes you are. And this is kind of an obvious example because it's a piece of paper that's been printed, but you have to learn how to produce these things in general if you want to be a reasonable printer and not just someone who runs a machine, But this is my favorite edition. If you actually want one yourself, I don't know who's gonna want one themselves, but if you want one, leave a comment on YouTube or send me a message on Facebook or something, and I will show you the other editions that we made, and you can sort of choose, I guess, which one you want. But this was for the Chinese students, very vibrant red, sort of soft touch paper material, and with a white hot foil stamping on it. I actually like it. My classmates did not like this, but I think it looks so outstanding and it really catches your eye. I like that. This is what it looks like without a cover. As you can see, the title page really doesn't do a bad job of kind of being its own cover. And this is probably going to be the one that we're going to distribute at all the events that we have to go to market this new major that we're going to be doing. And then the last one that we have, other than the ones that I'm going to be sending to local companies that I've toured, this is one that we stamped with a clear foil, and it just sort of gives it an embossing feel, and it's more of just like a touch kind of thing because you can't really tell, and it's very, very sleek and jet black. And the back is the same thing. It's a clear foil. So that was our binding and finishing project. That was one of the many awesome experiences that I've had in print at this university, and I can't wait to continue this in China. I'm definitely going to bring this one on the far left. I'm going to bring this one with me to China to show any of my potential employers. And yeah, that's pretty much this project. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.